Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to give it another two minutes before we get started, just to let some other attendees filter in. Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me all right, but appreciate everybody's time being here this morning. I'm Shannon Ghetto. I'm a project manager on the homeless services team at DFSS. I see some familiar names in the attendees list, so thank you all for coming. Before we get started, I might just briefly have our team introduce themselves who are on here for the webinar. So Jillian, maybe I'll pass it to you first, and then Selena and Alex.
Good morning. My name is Jillian Black. I'm the procurement proposal coordinator here at DFSS.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alejandra Magaña, and I'm one of the directors here for Homeless Services.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Selena Ruiz. I am also a director here at DFSS.
Thanks for introducing yourselves. So today we're going to be going over a request for proposal opportunity. It's called the Expansion Beds Non-Congregate Shelter Program. It was released on Monday, June 1st, and the due date is 6 weeks later on July 14th at 12 p.m. Central. So please keep that timing in mind if you end up applying for this opportunity. Jillian, next slide, please. Just a few housekeeping items. So due to the volume of participants, if folks are off mute, we've automatically put everybody on mute. If you do have any questions, though, you can feel free to submit them via the question box in the Zoom function. And throughout the presentation, we will try to respond to those questions at a midpoint once I'm kind of wrapping up with the overview of the RFP from a programmatic perspective, and then also have some time at the end of the presentation. We always submit an RFP amendment as well after this, which will be due on the 12th of June, this Friday, or excuse me, we will take questions for the amendment through this Friday. And we will make sure to include all the answers and questions that you ask in this presentation in that amendment, so you can keep a lookout for that next week. The webinar is being recorded as well, so you'll have access to this publicly once it's posted. Anything that is stated in the webinar is not intended to change the solicitation document. Any changes that will be in writing in the form will be in the form of an amendment, which I just spoke about. And the purpose of this webinar is really to provide any additional information and clarity from the written solicitation. A copy of the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is linked here. And so you can keep an eye out for that under the alerts and or funding opportunities tab. It usually takes about a week or 5 business days for that to get uploaded. And of course, DFSS retains the right to share a list of registrants to this webinar along with their contact and organizational information at our discretion. So just wanted to let you know that as well. Okay, so we already did the welcome and intros. We did the just kind of baseline rule setting. We'll go through the purpose and background of the RFP and then information about the scope and program requirements, selection criteria for those scored questions, as well as the timeline. Jillian will walk you through some technical assistance for the applicants and our e-procurement system, and then we'll take additional questions that you have at the end. So the purpose of this RFP, our homeless services team at DFSS is seeking applications from organizations to operate a year-round non-congregate shelter facility or facilities with a preference for a hotel-motel setting. A proposed program must provide shelter and supportive services focused on the target population, which is single adults and couples experiencing unsheltered homelessness, especially for those who are on the Chicago Transit Authority system. The RFP is part of DFSS's wider response to try and expand access to quality non-congregate shelter, especially during extreme weather advisories or encampment initiatives. And this program is really geared towards providing a safe, accessible place for folks to stay while supporting clients in moving towards the appropriate stable or permanent housing options or destinations. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about, the current trends and importance of the RFP. So mirroring national trends, the need for shelter and housing post-pandemic has grown quite a lot in Chicago, especially for, we know the supply of shelter placements for adult-only households has a hard time keeping up with the demand from those folks. The COC active list they have a dashboard with data that kind of shows at any given time what number of people are experiencing literal homelessness in our system. And from that active list data, system-wide, about 18,200 people are experiencing literal homelessness in our system as of March of this year. And out of those people, 73% on that list were single adults. Additionally, in March of 2026 as well, from the city's perspective, we have about 41% of our funded shelter beds are dedicated to serving single adults. And from shelter utilization analysis and reports that we have around these beds, especially in the winter months when we have expanded capacity with seasonal beds, that utilization and demand for those beds remains particularly high. About 94% for the beds for singles are occupied during that period of time. So these trends and data points really point to, I think, the need for this subpopulation and kind of the scarcity of supply that is needed to support them in moving inside. And then additionally, there's been some current and kind of ongoing initiatives from the city and the continuum that are important to point out in context of this RFP. So in early 2023, the COC continuum received about $60 million from HUD through a special notice of funding opportunity. And it was really focused on addressing unsheltered homelessness over a 3-year period through the Unsheltered Housing Initiative. So the success of that program in housing unsheltered folks has been great. They have utilized a lot of those slots and pretty much got all the people housed in the units that they could fund within a year and a half. DFSS also co-coordinates with the UHI street outreach teams to kind of have a citywide approach to ensuring unsheltered residents are served, both with case management, connecting to supportive services, and then shelter and housing placements as well. And kind of with this increased system-wide coordination and increased kind of demand or need that we're seeing from these adult-only households, it is pointing to the growing need for more quality non-congregate beds for the subpopulation, especially. So next slide, please. So the goals of this RFP, some of this has already been shared on the previous slide, but we're really seeking providers who can operate an emergency shelter program in a non-congregate setting at locations that are proposed by the applicant. So there is a preference for proposed programs to operate in a hotel motel setting, but there are also other options for facility types, which I'll get into on a later slide. But the program is really to serve that unsheltered adult, individual, and couple population that can be referred by street outreach teams directly or referrals through 311 year round. Proposed programs must have at least 30 non-congregate beds as a minimum. And then we're really seeking programs who can operate flexibly by scaling up or down the number of people served in their settings in response to weather and encampment needs, have a clear plan to reduce barriers to accessing their program, providing supportive services with a focus on permanent housing pathways, implementing policies and procedures that focus on a client's needs and are trauma-informed, and of course, providing referrals for services that are not available on site within the facility or facilities. Next slide, please. The target population, as I've said before, is focused on adult individuals and couples that are experiencing literal unsheltered homelessness. This is in accordance with HUD's literal definition of homelessness, especially for clients that are on the Chicago Transit Authority system. The HUD definition really relates to having, lacking an adequate fixed nighttime residence that's meant for human habitation. And then, of course, there's a lot of subpopulations within the adults that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So this kind of list, which is included in the RFP, kind of goes over that, but it includes, persons with limited English proficiency, people on the sex offender registry, people with disabilities, justice involvement backgrounds, LGBTQI+, recent immigrants to the United States, those that may have chronic drug use or substance use disabilities, those that struggle with mental health conditions, and survivors of gender-based violence. So we're really interested in proposed programs that can demonstrate the understanding and the unique needs of this target population, and then how to best serve them kind of based off of your previous experience and their needs. Next slide, please. Program requirements. So this slide really focuses on the differences for the different proposed facility options that are available in the RFP. So applicants must propose a non-congregate location with a preference for hotel motel sites, as we've said. The sites must be within the physical boundaries of the city of Chicago and have a minimum of 30 beds across all sites in the application. It should also include details on if the location is zoned for shelter, and if it's not zoned, providing those details on how they'll, acquire the zoning or go through the zoning board processes, since the applicant is responsible for that. Proposed sites will be secured by the applicant and or subcontractor if you have one. And then applicants can propose one of the following site types in their application. There's kind of 4 options here, and hopefully this was clear in the RFP, but just clarifying here as well. The first one is a site with non-congregate spaces. So it's not a hotel motel space, but it does have kind of private rooms that can be utilized for clients and access to showers and bathrooms, all of that. Option 2 is a hotel motel site with a block of rooms. So that's like one location at a hotel motel site with at least 30 rooms available for those clients. Option 3 is scattered hotel motel sites. So maybe a proposed application may have partnerships with a few different facilities and have like 10 rooms in one location and 20 rooms in another. That would be a scattered site as an example. And then the fourth option is that you don't have a facility or non-congregate facility identified. Folks can apply for the opportunity without having that information or a facility identified, but there's some questions in the scoring criteria that you need to apply for that ask specifically about describing the current state of how you're going to find a location and the type of facility details, structure, layout that you're looking for. So you need to include those details there. For options 1, 2, and 3, you do need to submit proposed site profiles as an attachment in your applications. So that's just why in the second row there, you can see that that detail is provided. And if you do have scattered sites, you need to submit one site profile for each of your scattered kind of sites that you're using for your proposed program in the application. Other prioritization details by site Applicants with identified sites are preferred over those who don't have any sites. This type of hotel motel, it's supposed to say the single site or block of rooms hotel motel site model is preferred over scattered site. And then in terms of other details for sites, applicants can subcontract hotel motel booking processes. They can pay for rooms directly or through subcontractors, and funds can be used to pay for cleaning of client rooms or repairs caused by clients if needed. You can refer to the program requirements in the RFP for specific arrangements for hotel motel rooms that should be included. There's more details there. And then again, all facility types, especially scattered sites, need to have flexibility to scale up and down based on bed needs and or funding availability. Okay, that was a lot. So maybe I will pause or just remind folks that you can put things into the chat if you do have questions. And I'll continue on actually with the next slide. So regarding services for program requirements, this is also detailed in that section of the RFP. So please refer to that for all of the details, but this tries to kind of encapsulate the big essential services that need to be thought about in your proposed applications. So it's really important to, of course, meet clients' basic needs. So providing 3 meals a day, access to laundry and showers for clients, limited storage, clothing, bus cards, other material supports for clients. Diversion and out-migration services at program entry should be provided where possible. Case management is very important for this subpopulation in this program model. So providing quality case management focused on housing pathways and also overcoming barriers to housing while focusing on linking and referring clients to supportive services based on their needs. You can find more details about that in the case management section of program requirements. Supportive services. So, agencies or proposed programs need to provide quality supportive services and linkages to services that can't be provided on site. So as examples, services surrounding substance use or linkages, mental health, behavioral health, employment opportunities, independent living skills, gender-based violence counseling, and legal services. Surrounding staffing, staff must provide a safe environment open to clients 24/7, must always maintain staff to client ratios of 2 to 15 24/7. Hiring should account for staff qualifications to best serve the target population, including having at least 1 licensed clinical social worker on staff. Staff training is required to keep clients and staff safe. So as examples, de-escalation techniques, crisis prevention and intervention. And then if scattered site hotel motel proposals can't have staff at all sites 24/7, there needs to be an on-call option for clients, motel operators, and applicants to be able to communicate as needed. Referrals, so programs must be able to accept referrals from 311 for shelter requests, DFSS, and approved street outreach providers directly. Low barrier approach to this shelter program is important. So eliminating total sobriety, behavioral requirements, and other barriers to access and shelter whenever possible is important. Bed reporting, there are requirements for all shelter providers to report available and occupied rooms and beds to the centralized shelter intake delegate daily. And then, of course, there's other requirements by site type. So please refer to the program requirements surrounding room checks, room payments. And then, of course, proposed programs should also reflect the Chicago COC core values around like harm reduction, trauma-informed care, et cetera. And then the other program requirements for food, safety, health handling that are outlined in the RFP. Okay, that was a lot, but we got through it. So now for performance goals and outcomes. Outcomes generally, DFSS does seek respondents with evidence of strong past performance against desired outcomes. Performance indicators include, but are not limited to, the percent of participants who exit to more stable or permanent housing, and that kind of initial threshold is at least 30% of households exiting meet that goal. Percentage of participants who exit shelter to a permanent housing destination. So just focused on permanent housing here. And the goal is to have at least 27% of households that exit reach that goal. percent of participants who can maintain or hopefully increase income, including employment income and or benefits. So you can kind of see the baseline threshold is 40% and the challenge threshold or goal is 52% of households. And then, of course, completed coordinated entry assessments are always important to be housing oriented locally. So the initial threshold is 40, but the challenge goal is 60%. Outputs, we also track program outputs, such as having 95% bed utilization, room utilization at any given time of the contract, and average length of stay of the program, of clients in the program over time, which we know varies, but is an important metric to be able to help move the needle in supporting programs we fund and also clients. Next slide, please. So the next, I think, 5 slides are just kind of going over the selection criteria based on the questions that you have to respond to in your proposed application. So the first section is worth 15 points. It's out of 100 scored points in total. So community involvement really focuses on, trying to evaluate applications focused on the respondents' understanding or demonstration of what the target population, in this case, unsheltered adults need. So including their strengths and assets and challenges and needs that they face through examples and evidence of what they've done historically or currently to support this population. Also understanding if the respondent has developed specific competencies and or infrastructure to better serve people experiencing unsheltered homelessness and explaining how they'll approach service provision and barriers to serving this population. Also sharing, a full count of policies and practices aimed at fostering and improving inclusion internally, respondents' leadership, and then directly how the leadership directly engages the diverse people of the communities it serves. And then finally, respondents having a process to obtain feedback that informs service delivery. So kind of a feedback loop, essentially. Next slide, please. So for organizational capacity, the questions in this section are worth about 30 points. And they really focus on kind of evaluating applications based on, if a respondent proposes adequate essential positions and personnel to devote to this work, describes appropriate staffing patterns and staff qualifications, and then also demonstrating that staffing plans are adequate to successfully execute the work of the proposed facility type and the number of proposed clients that they'll serve. So really focusing on staffing patterns, qualifications, details around that. Also being able to provide clear explanations on how to staff up and fill positions in a timely manner based on the contract start date. Having adequate systems and processes to support program monitoring with expenditures and fiscal controls. If you have processes to secure data collection and manage data generally, alongside with adequate processes for quality assurance and timely data entry, of course. And then being able to describe your proposed program type, and if you have an identified facility location, describing those communal spaces and room configurations to make it clear that you have an understanding of the proposed location and that it seems appropriate to serve the target population within the RFP. And then, of course, being able to describe your ability to operate with flexibility in bed capacity based on system needs during extreme weather events or encampment initiatives as well. Next slide, please. So for strength of proposed program, this is also worth a good number of points, 25 in total. We'll be evaluating applications based on the following scoring criteria. So when respondents describe their program in detail, including case management models, what on-site services will be provided, and they're able to tie it specifically to elements based off of the target population's needs and outcomes in the RFP. And they're able to describe the journey of a client from program entry up until completion or exit from the program clearly. The respondent's proposed program incorporates and aligns to the best practices in the local community standards referenced in the RFP. They have an effective and intentional approach to addressing conflict and maintaining a safe environment at the proposed locations, which includes plans for training and ensuring staff have skills necessary to address conflict effectively, a plan for room checks and monitoring guests to promote resident safety, that they have relevant partnerships with other agencies to expand service referrals and access of services for clients in a client-centered, comprehensive way, detailing the specific service partnerships that are confirmed and how referrals and that kind of linkage will occur. And then finally, respondents are able to describe how their program will manage facility needs and if the facility needs updates before operation. And if proposing a hotel motel facility, they outline a plan for booking and designation of roles for how they'll manage that booking process as well. Next slide, please. For performance management outcomes worth 15 points in the application, we'll be evaluating applications kind of based on if respondents are able to demonstrate evidence of strong past performance against desired outcomes and goals, and other notable accomplishments in providing services to this target population. If the respondent has experience using data to identify problems in service delivery and how they make or made improvements to its services and or practices. And then if respondents have experience disaggregating data, describing that and identifying how an example of how they've been able to address disparities in program delivery. And then, of course, when appropriate, DFSS may use prior performance data already collected by DFSS or relevant intermediary if that is available. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is the last section. So looking at reasonable costs, budget justifications, and leveraging of funds, it's worth 15 points for these scored questions. And we evaluate applications kind of based on if respondents have the fiscal capacity to implement the proposed program prior to reimbursement. Respondents can leverage other funds and in-kind contributions to support the total program and administrative costs. So whether it's state, federal, foundation, corporate, individual donations, different funding sources. And then respondent is able to demonstrate reasonable implementation costs and funding requests given the nature of the program. So kind of justifying the proposed budgets based off of the proposed scope of work and work plan. Okay, don't forget to put any questions you have in the chat. Selection criteria, so attachments, please update. You can ignore the part in red. I was supposed to delete that part, but the bullets below that are right. So please be sure to attach report studies or other documentation that show performance towards reaching the program goals, demonstrate results and accomplishments. Be sure to attach the resumes for key staff that are overseen in the program if needed. And attaching your organization's budget for the program is essential, and we'll go over that in a few slides. One other attachment that I need to revise this slide to reflect actually is just if you have a proposed hotel, motel, or like any facility that you have secured that's non-congregate, you need to attach the site profile in addition to the description of what's included in the site profile. Next slide, please. So the evaluation process, there's an evaluation committee that will look at the strengths of the proposals and the responsiveness to each of the selection criteria that I just went over. Failure to submit a complete proposal or respond fully to all requirements may make your submission subject to rejection. Our commissioner, upon review of recommended agencies or agency, may reject, deny, or recommend agencies that have applied for grants based on previous performance and/or an area need. And then DFSS reserves the right to ensure that all mandated services are available citywide and provided in a linguistically and culturally appropriate manner. Okay, so some important details for the folks on this webinar. So pre-proposal webinar is today. The due date to submit pre-proposal questions that I mentioned at the start of the webinar is this Friday, the 12th at 5 p.m. Central. So please make sure if you haven't asked questions in this webinar, if there's other questions that come up, you need to submit that to our team by that deadline. And we'll make sure to include responses to that in the amendment. Applications are due 6 weeks later from when it posted on June 1st. So that due date is Tuesday, July 14th at 12 p.m. Central, no later. And then the program period begins on November 1st, 2026. So programs are able to obviously start staffing up, preparing to serve clients, especially as the winter months and colder months get started during that time. Next slide, please. Budget. So the term of the contract for this RFP in the first year is about 14 months. So November 1st through December 31st of 2027. DFSS may extend this term for up to 3 additional periods, with each extension not to exceed 1 year, based on, of course, need and funding availability. Anticipated funding for this RFP is based on the non-congregate bed rate of $45 for DFSS. So total funding across all of the agencies, or if there's one agency selected, can be anywhere from $1,650,000 to $4,900,000. And DFSS anticipates bringing up to 300 non-congregate beds online through this RFP, and potentially funding up to 5 agencies, depending on the size of proposed programs and applications. The administrative cap for the program is 15% per application. And then agencies and or subcontractors must be able to demonstrate at least a 10% in-kind match for the program. Of course, you need to submit a budget as one of your attachments as well. So please submit a budget representing 1 year, 12 months of services for your proposed program. Cost category definitions are attached as budget instructions in every RFP, except for RFPs that have cost proposals, but you don't have to worry about that here. Be thoughtful and inclusive when developing your budget, and provide the important details around each of the different categories. Apply your program's actual costs here and make sure it's reflected in the budget that you're proposing. And we generally cannot give you more money than what you ask for in your budget, so that's just something to keep in mind. And please use reasonable cost questions in the application and that last section for the selection criteria that I went over to justify your proposed costs reflected in the budget that you will submit. This is just kind of an overview of some common errors that can come up in the budget proposals. So fringes, please check your calculations and make sure everything is adding up. Supplies, these are frequently under or over budgeted for, so just be mindful of that and trying to get that to be representative of what you think the true costs are. Client assistance, if this is an appropriate and allowable cost, don't forget to include it. Make sure your job description titles in the budget match what you put into your written questions of your application and make that clear. And that includes a brief description of the job in the budget document itself, if you've not discussed it specifically in your application. And then make sure that you show your in-kind match in your budget as well, or any matches that you have in your budget. Okay, final reminder of the deadline, July 14th, 2026 at 12 p.m. new. This is a Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. Before we go into application tips, we're gonna open the floor for any questions and answers. And I do see we have a couple questions in the chat right now.
Yeah, so I think, Matthew, I answered your question already. So you need to have a 10% match for the application, and we'll make sure to include that in the amendment in writing as well. And then a template for the preferred site profile. We didn't provide a template, but in the program requirements section, it kind of clearly lists what things you need to include. So like the site address, for example, the number of rooms and number of beds, a description of communal spaces as well. So I would refer to that and kind of, you can do it as bullets if you would like. It doesn't have to be written out as, in paragraph form, but just make sure that you hit all of the elements listed there. And then there's another question that came in. Our organization serves primarily youth. Is it possible to restrict clients for a proposal to youth, or does this RFP need to serve all ages? So if they are above the age, if they're not minors, above the age of 17, they're considered to be adults. We can submit a more formal response to that in the amendment. I like this Q&A functionality. Okay, I think that was all the questions.
Okay, there will be another opportunity for us to open the floor again towards the end of the presentation. So please feel free to continue to put any questions that you may think of in the chat. Okay, application tips. Our most important application tip that we can provide is to start your application as soon as you can and save it as often as you can as you're working on it. If you have never done business with the City of Chicago, please register into iSupplier as soon as possible. Review the RFP narratives and application questions closely. Remember that they align with the scope and the selection criteria. Please use the information in the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. There is a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces. Each response is allotted 4,000 characters. Please try not to use the back button on your browser. You could potentially lose your work. And again, we can't stress this enough to start your application yesterday. Start it as soon as possible and save it as often as you can as you're working on it. Just some tips for working in e-procurement. To submit multiple applications for an RFP, applicants will need to set up a unique user account in iSupplier. The e-procurement system is not capable of submitting more than one distinct proposal per associated email address. Therefore, you must use a separate email address for each submission. You can submit your application and later amend it up until the due date of July 14th at 12 noon. However, we strongly suggest that you avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting your application early. And please plan on your submission taking approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Please note that late applications cannot be accepted. For help, please make use of the e-procurement hotline at 312-744-4357. The hotline operates during business hours only, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can also request assistance via email at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. Again, we can't stress it enough to submit your application as soon as you can and save it as often as you go along. Just some agency requirements. We require agencies to provide articles of incorporation and any amended articles of incorporation. We also require an IRS affirmation letter for not-for-profit agencies. Please note that that letter must be dated within 60 days of your submission. And you can obtain that letter by calling the IRS directly at 1-877-829-5500. However, if you are a for-profit agency, please submit your original letter from the IRS showing your FEIN number. Your agency's UEI number is required, as well as essential contractor registration, and that can be provided from the entity overview page on the sam.gov website. And lastly, a certificate of good standing letter with the state of Illinois is required. We have a labor peace agreement ordinance that applies to all DFSS and CDPH delegates that have 20 or more employees working for their organization. Contractor must provide written notice to the commissioner or her designee within 72 hours of becoming aware that employees want to organize or that a union seeks to represent employees. You may ask, what is an LPA? A labor peace agreement is an agreement between an employer and a labor union that ensures that an organizing drive is not impacted by union busting techniques, including employee retaliation, and in return, they will not strike or stop work in a way that will impact human services. For technical assistance, there is a link to the RFP, as well as training documents on the alerts section of the website. And for questions on registration and e-procurement, please contact customer support at cityofchicago.org. And again, that helpline that was provided earlier, 312-744-4357. And we also have training materials that include documents and videos on the cityofchicago.org website under online training materials. And at this time, we're going to delve into how to enter your responses and accepting any amendments. So the first step in accepting an amendment, you will select Create Quote from the drop-down menu in the Actions box and click on Go. And this will take you to the application page where you can get started. If the RFP you are interested in has been amended, and in this case, it will be, you will need to acknowledge that amendment and accept it to start or submit your response. And to accept the amendment, you must click on View Amendment History. Next, to begin the acceptance and acknowledgement process, you must follow these steps after clicking View Amendment History. First, you click on the document number. Next, you click on the infinity or eyeglass icon to review the amended changes to the RFP. And then you click on the Acknowledge Amendments button to acknowledge receipt and understanding of the changes to proceed. And by acknowledging the amendment, you are indicating that you are aware of the changes made to the RFP in the amendment. When you get to this screen, you click on the I accept checkbox, and then you click on Acknowledge. Then you click on Yes to indicate that you confirm your acknowledgement of the amendment. Finally, you click on the checkbox that you accept the terms and conditions, and then you click on Accept to accept them. And that is the final step in acknowledging and accepting the amendment. And once the amendment is accepted, you can move forward with submitting your application. And we're about to go into that now. So to submit your application, so when you are ready to submit, meaning that you have answered all required questions, you've attached all required documentation, you start by saving your draft one last time, and then you click Continue. If you are missing information, iSupplier will give you an error message at the top of the screen, similar to what we see here. Usually that error message directs to something left undone in the application. So in the last example, the error message indicated that the lines had not been completed. In the example here, the error is about an unanswered question in the application or requirement section. And the quote value refers to your missing answer. So once your application is free from errors, meaning that you no longer receive that red notification at the top of the screen, you are ready to proceed and submit. And at that point, clicking Continue should put your application into the review and submit phase. Once you get to this screen, this is like a summary screen, and I'll show you a last chance to review all of your data and to confirm that everything is accurate. So please use that opportunity to double check your attachments, double check your responses. And then at the very bottom of the screen, you'll be asked to provide an electronic signature. So please be sure to fill in that signature before checking that box. And then once you selected the box and you put in your signature, you can click Submit. Once you submit your application, you will receive a submission confirmation. And you will also receive a confirmation email from eProcurement. However, you can email me if you desire confirmation prior to receiving that email, just to give you some peace of mind. And at this time, we're gonna open the floor for more questions. But while the questions are coming in, when this presentation is over, and you still have questions, you could send those questions to Shannon at, her information is on the screen here. Please note that last call for questions for the RFP is Friday, June 12th at 5 p.m. And then for non-programmatic questions, you have any questions regarding e-procurement, or you're having issues. Let me see, I see step 8 again. If you're having issues with any technical related issues, can be sent to the e-procurement hotline, customer support at cityofchicago.org. And their number again is 312-744-4357. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can also contact me if you just want to make sure that we received your application. My email is jillian.black@cityofchicago.org. Shannon, I do see a couple of questions.
Someone wanted to see step 8 again. I think in your section, Jillian.
Okay. Step 8 of, let's see.
And then there's another question about bathrooms being communal or if they must be in single rooms, and we'll clarify that in the amendment. So keep a lookout for that, please. Okay, and then there's another good question about flexibility with the start date if the location that is identified is not zoned for shelter services. We've gone through the zoning processes in the past and may be difficult, in less than 6 months. So, yes, given that zoning, if there's zoning processes that need to take place, there can be flexibility with the start date. And even when, the contract starts, there's some flexibility to staff up and do all of those things before serving clients as well.
Thank you. And for the individual that wanted to see the slide, please note that these slides will be provided, and the webinar will be uploaded to the DFSS webpage, the YouTube page. So all of this information will be available. Before we close out, Shannon, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's it. Appreciate everyone's time today, and please feel free to send me emails if you do have more programmatic questions, and we'll make sure to submit a response to that in the amendment. So keep a lookout for that in the next week or two. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar, and good luck on your applications, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.